Good morning, everybody. My name is Todd Kornarhens, and I am one of the pastors here at Community of Hope Church in Nocatee. And being that it's Wednesday, midweek hump day, I just wanted to give you a word of encouragement, not just to get you through today, but to get you through the rest of your week, knowing that no matter what comes against you, no matter what you're dealing with, Christ is dealing with it with you. He is in the midst of it. He is fighting with you. He is fighting through you. He is fighting by you. No matter what you're encountering, he is encountering it with you. And when he encounters it with you, the good news is the God who defeated sin, death, and the devil is in the midst of it. And because of that, we won't just persevere. We will triumph through him. And so this week at Community of Hope, 9:45, Memphis Jack's Barbecue off US 1. This week we will be looking at Matthew chapter 4 verses 1 through 11, which is the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness. But our first lesson will actually be from Ephesians chapter 2. Now, usually when we go to Ephesians chapter 2, everybody jumps right to Ephesians 2, 8, 9, and 10 with good reason, because Ephesians 8 reminds us, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing, it is a gift of God. And that is such a powerful verse and reminds us of how awesome our God is and that he was willing to send Jesus Christ, not because we deserved it, but because of his love. But right before that is verse 7. And verse 7 is so powerful and is so awesome, but I think the reason we don't go to it like we do verse 8 is because it's a little confusing. And let me read it and see. It's a little confusing. It says, so that in the coming ages he might show us the immeasurable riches of his grace in kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. Told you, a little confusing. But I want to break that down just a little bit and pull out one phrase that to me is just awesome. The immeasurable riches of God's grace. Just stop and think about what it's saying. Paul is saying God's grace is so rich. It's so rich in mercy. It's so rich in love. It's so rich in forgiveness. It is so rich that it cannot be measured. We can't even begin to measure how awesome God's grace is, because think about it. To measure something, you've got to start from where it begins to where it ends. But God's grace doesn't. It has no beginning. It always has been, and it will never end. God's grace will always be there for us because of what God has done for us in Christ Jesus on the cross. The immeasurable riches of God's grace. Whatever you encounter this week, know the immeasurable riches of God's grace. The grace that cannot even begin to be measured because it is so powerful and so awesome is right there in the midst of it with you. That is such an awesome reminder of God's love, of God's grace, of God's power. So this week, guys, whatever you're dealing with today or through the rest of the week, just know you do it with the immeasurable richness of God's amazing grace. Hey, if you don't have a church home, we'd love for you to visit with us again Sunday at 9:45 at Memphis Jack's Barbecue off US 1 here in Nocatee. Until then, God bless. Have an awesome week.